welcome back to the Weekly Roundtable. I'm your host, Mark Stansberry, and we continue our discussion with our guest, George Nigh, former governor of Oklahoma. Governor, there was a statement you said, let's do for Oklahoma what Rogers and Hammerstein did. Let's put the exclamation point there, Oklahoma. Tell about your involvement with our state song.
Well, there are two stories. Let me tell the short one first, and that is that I was proud to be the author of the bill in 1953 that made Oklahoma from the stage play Oklahoma our state song. But another story I'd like to tell in conjunction with that is that we're often confused about what the name of the play and the name of the song. And I ask you if you, right now, your listeners, if they would just spell the name of the play about our state, just in their mind, just spell it. And I'm going to just pause as everybody thinks about how would I spell the name of the stage play from which our song came. Now, they're not the same. One is Oklahoma and one is Oklahoma. The name of the song is Oklahoma. I tell this story because Rogers and Hammerstein bought the rights to a play called Green Grow the Lilacs, written by Lynn Riggs of Claremore, Oklahoma. And they changed it. They wrote some new songs. They wrote some new dance scenes and all that sort of stuff. And the name of the play was Green Grow the Lilacs, but they didn't want that to be the name of the play they were putting on, so they wanted a different name. So they kicked around what the name would be, and they opened off Broadway with this new play, and they named it Away We Go. So the name of the play was the musical was Away We Go, and there's a scene where the bride and groom are riding off after their wedding in a surrey with a fringe on top, and on the back of the surrey is a sign, Away We Go. And they named that the play. Well, Rich Bond, who went to high school with me and my brothers in McAlester, Oklahoma, was the only Oklahoman who ever starred as Curly, the lead role, on Broadway. And he later lived in Tulsa after he left the play. But he was Curly. And he told me this story. Rich Bond, who starred as Curly from McAlester, Oklahoma, told me this story. That they were sitting around saying, oh, the name of this play is not very exciting. You know, Away We Go. That's not going to bring anybody in. And Rich said that Mrs. Hammerstein said, well, why don't we call it Oklahoma? And the crowd sitting around the table discussing it said, well, that doesn't sound exciting, Oklahoma. That still doesn't have the punch or the enthusiasm that we want. Rich Bond told me that Mrs. Hammerstein said, well, why don't we put an exclamation point after it and call it Oklahoma? And they did. So the name of the song is Oklahoma without an exclamation point. The name of the play is Oklahoma, Oklahoma, exclamation point. I use that a lot of times in my speeches saying we need to do what two people did who bought the rights to that play. We need to put an exclamation point behind it and know that this state that we represent and love is Oklahoma. Now, that's the story I like to tell. And the other story I like to tell is about how I've got the legislature to adopt the bill, but I got to tell you that's too long for a radio interview right now.
We're so intrigued by that. Maybe you should tell it.
Well, okay, I introduced the bill in 1953 to make it the state song, and I thought it would be a piece of cake. And the legislator from Ada was also, I think, a history teacher, and he was opposed to, and I'll give you his exact quote, we're going to get rid of this song that was steeped, we had a state song, he said that was steeped in tradition and couched in history, and you want to replace it by a song written by two New York Jews who've never been to Oklahoma that say taters and tomatoes. And he started singing the state song that was the song at that time. And it was Oklahoma, a toast. And it ends up, so I give you Oklahoma, it's a toast we all can quaff. And I said, they can quaff, but they can't tater and tomato. But he walked among the legislators crying, singing the then state song, Oklahoma, Oklahoma, fairest daughter of the West. And he would make legislators stand up because it was the state song. So I realized I was about to lose my bill, so I asked that they lay it over for one legislative day. I called, and they did, there's no objection, and I talked to Ira Humphreys, who was a state representative from Chickasha, where Oklahoma College for Women then was located. It's now a different school.
Right.
And I said, you got a choir down there that can sing songs from Oklahoma? And he said, yes. And I said, I want them up here tomorrow. And I called Ridge Bond, who then lived in Tulsa, and I said, Ridge, can you come? You still got some of those costumes you wore on Broadway? And he said, yes. I said, put one on and get over here tomorrow. You're going to sing Oklahoma for the legislature. And then I called Jenkins Music Company in downtown Oklahoma City, and I said, you got any legislation you're really interested in? They said, yes. And I said, okay, I need a piano. So they sent me out a piano. And then the next day, I got up, and as the legislature convened, I asked for unanimous consent to allow special performances to come and guests to be granted privileges of the floor. No one objected, so in came the choir from OCW, all women, and they sang Surrey with a Fringe on the Top, and they sang, Oh, What a Beautiful Morning, and they sang Poor Judd is Dead, Poor Jude is Dead, and then the piano started going up the scale, boom, 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 and Ridge Bond kicked open the doors into the floor of the House of Representatives, came in there in full Oklahoma cowboy costume and started singing, Oh, Oklahoma, where the wind comes. And the legislators stood and clapped in time to the song that the choir was singing and Ridge Bond. And as I said, 300 people sitting in the gallery all stood and sang. And, of course, I had put them there. And we all stood and sang Oklahoma, ended with a big yahoo. And then I said, I moved that this House bill making it the state song pass. And they called the roll, and it passed the day after it would have lost. But it was a fun, fun day. And to this day, anywhere you go around the world, to this day, one of the three most important images that they have of Oklahoma is now the stage play, not the Grapes of Wrath.
Right.
The stage play, it's our athletics, and it's unfortunately the Oklahoma City bombing. That's
right.
The three things that people think of when you say Oklahoma.
No question.
And I'm glad that they think of it with an exclamation point.
Well, I am too, and thank you for doing that and going through that extra effort, because it definitely paid off for our state.
Thank you.
You know, you launched into international and global relations